I want to thank everybody for your attendance today. This is Kevin Kurz, the Westell Technologies Director of Sales for Distribution. Today, we're going to do an overview on our Westell Universal Remote Annunciator. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Mike Brownson, who is our Director of Business Development.
Oh, thanks, Kevin. Appreciate that. As Kevin mentioned, we're going to talk about a brand new product that we're launching. It's all about trying to create solutions that are easier for the integrator to install and ones that the AHJs would love the features on. You know, as all of you in the industry are aware, we've had a code base out since 2009. Well, in NFPA 72-2010, the very first version of the NFPA code, they started calling for a dedicated remote annunciator. There's been a few different solutions to this, but a lot of them, let's just say they were slightly less than elegant. And you know what? In NFPA 1225, it's still there. Sure, it's evolved some. They changed some of the language to account for non-BDA fed systems, to add a few different things, but it's still pretty much the same. I know a lot of the code, a lot of HJs out there are really focused on using the IFC code. Well, as in 2018 IFC, they now started referencing NFPA 72 and 1221, which, yes, you got it, mandates dedicated remote annunciators. So we're seeing a lot of interest within the industry for basically a remote annunciator solution that's universal, that's easier to install. And what we came up with was our solution. Now, to take that a step farther, we're seeing some HJs that actually now want two annunciator locations, one in the fire control room and one out in a public location like the lobby or a foyer. So we're starting to see that in Florida. Will it grow? Yeah, perhaps. But there's some, like for example, our ProtectLink solution, our brand new intelligent BDA that we introduced here a few months back. We have a remote annunciator solution designed for that. But if you want to have two locations, well, then again, we have a solution for you. All right, so let's talk about the old way of doing it. A lot of the gear that's out there now, okay, you take a bidirectional amplifier and the battery backup, and it may be, well, it could be anywhere in the building, right? Quite oftentimes, it's the good location for a BDA is a top floor, especially in a high rise, so you can keep the donor antenna run shorter and manage that more easily. That BDA could be anywhere, but where's the fire control? Where does the dedicated annunciator need to be? Well, it needs to be in the fire control room, typically, if there is one. If there isn't one, then it needs to be in a public location near the entrance on the first floor. So oftentimes these are nowhere near each other. So what do you have to do? You have to run a whole bunch of cables from the BDA battery backup all the way down to this dedicated annunciator solution. It passes through the alarms to the fire control panel. That's cool. But now all of those conductors now need to be monitored for integrity. So now I got to have circuit monitoring and end-line resistors and it just becomes complicated. And if you want to, add a further complication on top of that, some HJs might look at that line and say, well, that needs to be 2-hour protected pathway. Now that connection got expensive, it got complicated. A lot of these annunciators that are out there now require separate power supply and battery backup. So there's another one, and quite honestly, they're pretty complicated to set up. I thought there's a better way of doing this, right? So let's look at the Westell way. So instead of having everything, a big multi-conductor cable run to the fire control room and then passing the alarms through a remote annunciator, created an interface unit. This interface unit is a small NEMA4 enclosure. It's about the size of a piece of paper, 8.5 by 11. I think it's like 8 by 10, something like that. A couple inches thick, and you see it there to the right of one of our BDAs here. And so that little control unit or interface unit has all of the inputs and outputs needed. So on the left side, you take the alarmed outputs from the BDA, So we actually work on anybody's BDA that gives us normally open relay outputs for alarms. All right, so that's why it's called the Universal Remote Annunciator, because it truly is very universal. So any BDA that provides, normally open relay outputs, you connect into that left side. You notice on the bottom of our box, we have conduit fittings. All right, so more and more, just for both having a clean installation and, in the fire world, they like to see stuff in conduit. Having a protected installation is important. So we provide the conduit fittings, all three of them. So we have a 3/4 inch conduit fitting there on the left. That's where the alarms come in from the BDA. So that's designed to be mounted pretty much right next to the BDA. There's no integrity monitoring when that distance is kept short and that pathway is protected. So that makes that very easy to connect. Now, the fire alarm guys, they'll come in with their addressable modules, put that in the BDA room, and then connect the alarms through the URA. So over on the right side, we have all the alarm outputs you can then feed to the fire panel. That does two things for us. All of that like protected pathway stuff now becomes the realm of the fire alarm integrator, not the BDA installer. All right, so that really simplifies that job. For the fire alarm guys, they just have maybe a single pair going to a handful of addressable modules, and everything then passes through. Now, inside the interface unit, we have two RJ45 jacks. So using a standard Cat5, Cat6 cable, it connects to our remote annunciator. Now, we add integrity monitoring to that line, and if that senses a failure of any sort, open, short to ground, loss of power, anything happens to that remote annunciator, you get an alarm at the interface unit, which then notifies the fire alarm panel. So that really eliminates the need for circuit integrity monitoring. So if one of those lines gets cut, an alarm is triggered, the fire panel is notified, you get to call, hey, I got an alarm here. It actually triggers the component fail alarm, which is kind of cool. The NFPA and both IFC added this sort of an extra alarm out there just for, random stuff that isn't actually just a BDA. So that's the architectural approach that we took. And as I mentioned, our URA can accept 2 remote annunciator outputs. And then we'll talk more about what that remote annunciator panel looks like. At a high level, that's kind of the idea we've got going. What's going on with the interface unit? Here's a big picture of it. All right, conduit fittings on the bottom. But inside, here's our connections. So on the left, you see they're all nicely labeled, all of our input alarms, plus 2 custom alarms, just whatever else you might have that doesn't fit one of the standard labeled alarms. Over on the right side, we provide Form C relay outputs. So all of the alarms coming in are then paired to those alarm outputs. Some jurisdictions only require a single supervisory annunciator. Clear down at the bottom is what we call our off normal. So if any of the other alarms trigger, that's actually the only connection that's needed for those AHJs that only require a single alarm connection output. So we thought, again, let's keep it easy. That way you don't have to like daisy chain a whole bunch of these contacts together in order to get a single output, saving time, saving trouble. On this board, we also have standard indicator lights, of course, power light. We have COM failure in case, that lets you know if there's a good connection to the remotes or not. There's a mute button. You can press that for a momentary mute, or you can press and hold for a permanent mute. So the annunciators themselves all have an audible alert in them. Not all jurisdictions require an audible alarm. So we manage that really super simple. And you see, we do have a dip switch in this system, but at this point, there's only one switch that's used, and that's to tell us whether or not there's a second remote annunciator tied to the jack. And then that tells the board that we now have to monitor that second jack for integrity. That's what the innards look like. Keep it simple and keep it pretty easy. Not a whole lot of things to program. We have a DC input. This is designed to run off of your BDA's standard DC input. So you can piggyback this off of your BBU or your BDA. It'll accept anything from 48 to 24 volts DC. So we pretty much cover the gamut there. So no additional power supply needed. And the current draw is super low. So it's really kind of a non-issue. I'll get into that one in a sec here. So I promised I'd talk about the remote annunciator itself. That actually, well, depending on what screen you're looking at it on my screen, that's actually that actual size. Only 6.5 inches high, 5 wide, about 1 inch deep. And it's designed to mount on the front of a 2-gang electric box. So if working ahead of time, what you can do is have the electrical contractor drop a 2-gang electric box wherever you need it, conduit into it. And that way it basically becomes a virtual flush mount and makes it just super easy, super attractive to install. So if it does need to go into a public space, there's not a problem at all. I see we've got a question on the Cat5, Cat6 distance. We're not using Ethernet, so I will be getting to that, but we offer, it's 3,000 foot distance tested. Pretty much farther than anyone would ever need, I would think. Even if you're pulling cable into an adjacent building on a campus where the fire control room may be, yeah, 3,000 feet. I think we got it covered. All right, so when we look at the features, all right, here's our list of features. So we do provide 8 alarm inputs, 2 of which are tied to our component fail output. They're kind of that catch-all. We can support 2 remote annunciators, each up to 3,000 feet away. So we've got the distance covered. Uses standard Cat5, Cat6 straight through cable with RJ45s on each end. That's very inexpensive, it's very readily available. We get the power, as I mentioned before, from the battery backup from the BDA. And we only draw 4 milliamps. So this really doesn't even play into your battery life issues. It's inconsequential. We offer 7 Form C relay outputs. All right, so we have the 6 outputs that are named in the NFPA code, and then we have that summary output that it will trigger when any of the other 6 are triggered. And then we have the indicator lights on the interface unit for ease of troubleshooting. The remote annunciators do include an audible, and then that can be temporarily or permanently disabled. And then, as I mentioned earlier, if there is a cable fault between the interface unit and the remote annunciator, it will trigger an alarm. We approach this in a way that we're really trying to make it simpler to install. And if we can reduce the labor, then it also saves money. You'll find from a price perspective, this is very competitive with the other solutions out there, but we have the advantage of being a lot more attractive. So if it does need to be in a public location, let's just say it ain't ugly. So we've got the audible alert. And as I mentioned at the start, it supports any BDA or DAS equipment that's out there, so long as they provide normally open relay outputs. Simplified wiring. So it's really a 1-person job. I don't need to read all this. I'm sure you guys can read, but you get the idea here. Flexible, it's low power. It's just easy, right? And much more attractive than a lot of the other solutions out there. Sidestep to our other brand new product. So for those that might have heard about our new ProtectLink BDA, we use the same annunciator panel, but we don't need that interface unit. So what we did with this is the BDA actually has the intelligence to talk directly to the annunciator panel. So we essentially borrowed that annunciator panel and that protocol, the communication protocol, and we created this universal interface that'll now work with anybody's BDA. Just to make sure that there's no confusion here, the URA, Universal Remote Annunciator, wouldn't be needed with the ProtectLink BDA because it's already built in. So all that's needed is one remote annunciator panel. But if for whatever reason on a ProtectLink system, the AHJ wanted a second panel, like Larry's asking here. So that second panel, it is wall mount. So it is designed to be a flush wall mount, and ideally, like I said, on a 2-gang electric box. That way, all of the cabling is completely hidden and protected. Anyhow, so on a ProtectLink BDA, which I think has a whole bunch of other cool features, and if you haven't heard much about it, be sure to reach out to one of our sales guys, and here's all their contact information. So, and what territories are covered. So out in the east side, we have, or the northeast is Bill Dow. The southeast is Rick Roush, and out west is Gil Martinez. And Kevin, who did this fine introduction, he is the director of sales for distribution. And our fearless leader, Gabe Guevara, is the VP of channel and IBW sales. And then out west, we also have a sales engineer that I'm sure probably over time, some of you guys may have worked with him. He's a wealth of knowledge. And then someone who's not listed here is Kevin McEnany. He's our tech support guy. So for any post-sale technical support, and is available, just go to westell.com, go to the support tab, and you'll find his contact information, an 800 number that will get routed. So Rick, thanks for joining. I see you've asked our distributors about it. So it is a new product. We do now have stock. Are working with a particular distributor that's not aware of this. Yeah, please let us know, let Kevin know. We'll make sure they're up to speed, and we'll make sure you get a price and delivery. Okay, Dylan, do we offer a power supply in BBU? No, we do not. At 4 milliamps, you know, it really designed to work off the BDA's battery system. I suppose if this becomes, you know, somewhat of an issue, we could probably work something out. But again, at 4 milliamps, we didn't feel that it made sense to have a separate battery and whatnot. Hope that answers that one. Good question, Rick. All right. So the SKU for the entire system, which includes the interface unit and the remote panel, is that CS19 URA-003. For just the remote annunciator panel, that's a CS40-ANNUNC, ANNUNC. Now, all of these products are on the website. An inquiry, if you need to, and obviously we've got the data sheet, which has more than enough information on it. So that should cover that. Farouk, is it UL listed? The enclosure is UL 508. At this time, we have not approached UL 2524. So the answer is yes and no. Now, obviously, if you find particular applications where that becomes a concern, let's keep going. Let's talk about it. So the remote annunciator, let's kind of flip back up here. Oop, there we go. So it's 1.1 inches deep. So not quite flush. So it does surface mount, but it's nearly flush. Now, I've had the question at times. So what if that needs to be, you know, keep it hands off in an area that is publicly accessible, like the lobby or foyer? I have suggested to some folks a very simple solution. You know, those clear thermostat plastic covers? That would be a simple solution as a kind of a locking clear cover. You get your enunciation, you get your audio, but nobody's going to be touching those buttons because you might have noticed there was a lamp test and a silence button on the front. I think that exhausts the questions, and I really appreciate folks asking the questions. It helps me think of things that I may have missed. I hope this was, you'll find some applications. Again, and when you contact your favorite distributor, if there's any issues, well, just let our regional or let Kevin know, and we'll make sure that they get this product in their system. And with that, I think that's really all I've got. Thank you for joining. And Kevin, any closing words?
Yeah, I just want to thank you for putting this together for us today. We're just a phone call away, and we do appreciate your attendance today. Thank you so much, Mike.
All right. Hey, you're welcome, Kevin. Both Kevins for getting this all set up.
Excellent. Thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend.